Welcome to Real Zeal, a podcast like no other, brought to you by yours truly, Trish Burke.
And James Burke. ADHD is loud, proud and unfiltered.
We are absolutely honoured to bring you all the topics, big to small and everything in between, in a way that is honest, truthful, with a veil of compassion, all in the name of ensuring everyone feels heard and validated.
We can't wait to host a myriad of guests that will blow your mind, and we're going to have candid conversations that will absolutely knock your socks off.
So get your tissue box ready for the tears that you might shed. Pad up because you're gonna piss yourself laughing.
Strap yourself in and get yourself ready for some real zeal.
Well, hello and welcome to Real Zeal. I am your host, Trish Burke.
I'm Burke, your co-host, and we've got someone exciting here today.
Absolutely exciting. This is Arijana. She is a psychologist and an absolute delightful friend of mine from a long time back. We have worked together. We have done a lot of boss babe collaboration of how do we survive this world.
Sure have.
Navigating the space of supporting other humans,
Yes.
but also caring for ourselves as clinicians.
Yes.
We're coming today with a very realistic topic that I think hits home for many neurodivergent individuals, particularly those that are late diagnosis ADHDers or autism. Oh, fuck.
ADHD
ADHDers. That's what I wanted to say, the hybrid model, or even getting a late edition autism diagnosis as well.
Yes.
What we are discovering as part of Real Zeal is that neurodiversity is something to be celebrated, and the diversity factor is something that makes our world interesting, exciting, and fabulous. So Ariana is going to help to unpack that with us today.
Yeah.
And we have kind of a bit of a cool topic. Becky, do you want to sum it up for us? Because I reckon it's too good for
Because
my
you've
words.
forgotten?
No, I haven't. It was like
But a little bit.
a little bit.
Well,
I'm now digging in my brain.
we're going to be talking about when you're diagnosed later in life,
Yes.
and then you start to discover yourself and discover that, hey, you actually have needs, or there's ways that you want to live your life that's more your real, authentic self as an ADHD, as an autistic person, any of these. But then sometimes that kind of rubs up a little against work life. How do I actually live that out in a way that is truthful and real to me, but doesn't necessarily create more friction with people around us and things like that?
So it's like being authentic without alienating those around you.
She remembered the title.
I did.
Yes.
But then
that relational piece, because we are social creatures
That's
and
it.
we coexist with other humans of all different ways of functioning, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think so many things impact that. The way our brains work impact
Yes.
that. Our culture impacts that.
Yes.
Our cultural upbringing and our heritage from like our
Yes.
families, our roots.
Our gendered layers.
Yeah.
Man, there's just so many.
Socioeconomic stuff. We could just keep going. So many layers to us.
Absolutely. And I think all human beings were created for connection, whether you want to connect face to face,
Yes.
whether you want to connect online with some people, whether it's better connecting side by side instead of face to face. There is so many different ways to connect.
Yes.
But as human beings, we crave different levels of connection
Sure.
and all are valid.
That's true.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into it, Ariana, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So happy to be here, guys. Excited to see where we go today. So I'm a clinical psych. I have a practice that's running now in my third year, but I've been practicing for quite a lot longer than that. And I'd say that what's really inspired me in my practice is taking somewhat between a holistic and integrative approach. And so I love to go beyond the parameters of just talk therapy in the room. We talk about a person as a system. We think about the mind, the body, our nervous system, relationships like we talked about, and how all of this sort of coexists as an ecosystem inside of you. And so for me, I'm really passionate about sort of taking a really tailored, unique approach for each person and figuring out what really works for you, hence the authenticity piece, and then supporting someone to start to go on their journey to really design a life that is meaningful for them, creative for them. And sometimes that involves going through a bit of deconditioning, reconditioning, and a lot of life creation, which I'm really passionate about.
So exciting. Something that grabbed me, Berkey, and I think would grab you too, is a lot of society views psychology as sit down and talk
Yep.
therapy.
It does.
You're on the couch, you're opposite each other. We've talked about our journeys with psychology and do you lay on the couch? Do you sit on the couch? But even our
My
conversations...
clients do all the above.
Yeah, so good. But even your conversation about integrating that holistic side of
Yes.
understanding that human beings were made to move and
Yes.
what does that look like from a sensory provision perspective in the psychology space.
Yes, which I appreciate so much from what you do and the conversations we've had.
Well, look at us. We're like the fidgeters of all kind. We've got our like weighted soft plushies today. We definitely, I think, embody as ADHDers here on this side of the couch that movement input actually helps us to engage better with others and engage better in conversation, which I think in turn then leads to more authentic conversations and being able to actually unpack the deep stuff, which is hard to get to, right?
Yes. But also, I think a big thing for me that you're touching on is, you know, moving out of that primitive talk therapy into embodied therapy, and even just sort of coming here in the chats that we were having beforehand, and how important it was to actually just kind of get comfortable and think about the space that we're in. And that's kind of what really motivates me with clients too, is like, how do you actually embody the things that we might talk about, even if you're having an aha moment and you're making all these beautiful realizations. It's the integration in between that matters, and how do you actually live what you're kind of working on. That's important.
That's so true. Now, Burke, for yourself,
Yes.
I know we've touched on this before, you get your diagnosis.
Yes.
You get this sudden validation of I'm not
Broken.
One, I'm not trying to push a cart uphill anymore because now I understand the why behind the what in the way that I process things or the way that my body and brain like to work. But then you come back to work with your new shiny piece of paper or your newfound knowledge of yourself, which has been incredibly validating. But then you're like, now I want to unmask and I want to try and take away some of those layers that are actual effort and actual work. And you can jump back to our masking episode for a little bit more of a deep dive on that.
And I often find some guardrails that people run into are, is it even safe for me to do that?
Safety.
You know, and what does it mean to have this diagnosis? Because I think we still largely exist in a world that sees it as a form of a disorder that needs to be treated and managed and corrected, versus it being differences in a processing style and divergences of how the brain operates. And so learning that that's okay and actually feeling safe to kind of like explore how you might go on a journey of self-expressing that in your life. Finally, for those that perhaps are being diagnosed as adults.
Well, for me, the very first time I started going back to work after being diagnosed, and one of the first kind of adjustments I started to make for myself was not doing the whole business shirt and chinos and
you're in the corporate environment,
shoes.
right?
Yeah, in an office and wearing jeans and t-shirts and sneakers because that's what I live in. That's what I feel comfortable in. But then also going, well, you know, what are people going to think? Are they going to think, well, this guy's just given up now and he doesn't care anymore because he's been here for a certain amount of time and so thinks he can just do whatever he wants now. But, you know, for me, that real difference was going, well, I'm not sitting here and constantly running through my head is this whole uncomfortableness about what I'm wearing and am I sitting the right way so that my shirt sits nicely on me and everything.
But not
like
just that. For some, it could be the morning agony of analysis paralysis of what do I wear and the executive function of that entire process.
That's a thing, Ari. Like, absolutely. And that's something I can often struggle with. And so almost in a sense, for me, I've made a bit of a work uniform set of outfits so that I'm like, I know this is presentable, acceptable, functional for my work day, but also why are we sitting there going, we have to conform to everyone else's perception of what that is behaviourally, or even on the outward appearance of how we're dressing, sitting, behaving, etc. And who dictates those norms?
Totally. And where does that start, like in our development, if we're thinking about, you know, being undiagnosed in childhood, going into adolescence, and how that sort of gets shaped in terms of, I know I'm different, and I put different in sort of quotations of it's a beautiful thing to explore what's different about us. We're all different anyway. But I'm talking about the different that's almost a trauma pattern that we develop and sort of this self-shame that we start to carry of like, I'm different, therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z to assimilate or mask or fit in. And how infused that can be into even daily decisions like what we're wearing at work, because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's it. And it's those decisions that can take over our mind so much and become such a burden that even if we don't necessarily realize how much of a burden it is, it's not until you actually start to let go of those things and start to live authentically and live how you want to.
Yes.
But getting to that point is a huge deal.
Yes.
How does someone get to that point of being able to go, okay, well, I think I know how I want to live that is authentically me and express myself, but what's everyone else going to think?
Totally. I would kind of wind it back a few steps and hope, and for anyone that's gone through a diagnosis process, that in itself can be very different. Some kind of ride the really clinical pathway. Some have maybe gone just straight to a psychiatrist. They might have gotten the piece of paper and the label. And then they're like, where to now? Hopefully some have had the opportunity to, as you're going through that assessment process, ideally it's a collaborative conversation with your psychologist that you walk out not just going, cool, that's kind of a bit of a label that can start to kind of speak to part of my experience, but you've actually walked out with the beginnings of some pieces of understanding about where you might need to go next. And then the fun part starts, which is that integration journey, which can, for a lot of people, naturally be a whole bunch of questions that you've initially got of like, what does this mean relationally? What does this mean in terms of my executive function? What does this mean in terms of my sensory preferences? What is my sensory profile? How important is that? So many things. And sort of allowing yourself to sit for a period of time in a lot of questions. And we live in a really saturated world of information too. So sometimes it's a lot of information overload to start off with because you're like, I need to read everything under the sun to educate myself on this. And being sort of really careful about where you're picking that information as well, because there's a lot of trash and treasure out there in terms of what can be helpful.
100%. I think a little phrase that's been rolling around in my mind, and it is one of my book chapter titles. You'll have to wait for that to finally drop. My dopamine will need
Excited
to
for that.
go a bit of a deep dive on that. But diagnosis being the thing that unlocks understanding. And
I love that.
A diagnosis not necessarily for the sake of needing something else, but it helps us to resonate with something of like, oh, I've got others out there that get this, that get this journey, get this way of thinking, this experience of the world. Yeah. But then the more, that whole phrase of the knowledge is power, right? So the more we know about ourselves, the more we can actually advocate or speak up for the things that matter to us, the things that we need. Yes. And it is for a lot of neurodivergent individuals in particular, it's a need. It's not like I just want to have a new fidget. I just want to, move my body. It's actually I need to do it in order to engage and focus better or participate and connect better with my environment or with who I'm talking with or who I'm amongst. And
it's a deep process because for some it's sort of like, rewriting social scripts that you've thought you've had, maybe redefining your value system because it's actually been a set of mental rules you've had of this is how I think my life should be and this is what's important to me versus what you actually deeply value within sort of the deeper parts of you. James laughs at that.
And
we're touching on something.
You're just summing up my conversations with my psych this year. It's hilarious.
I'm glad. It sounds like a good relationship. Yeah.
And I think that whole concept for both of us in our adult diagnosis journey has been a lot of the lens of compassion is now the lens that we look through at ourselves as opposed to a lens of condemnation, which is actually a lot of what an undiagnosed childhood looks like of you're doing it wrong, just try harder. Yes. You're clearly not trying hard enough. I mean, all phrases we have heard numerous times and on our reports as children.
I call that sort of the shell of trauma that you initially have to work through to get to the gift of who you are. And that in itself is a lot of hard work. And for some people, the diagnosis journey, the next step is actually then doing that work, which is letting go of, a lot of what's maybe worked and kept you safe, but it's also what's blocking you to that deeper sort of self-expression.
That's really interesting because when I got diagnosed, I was surrounded, it was during COVID, and so it was during all the ADHD stuff starting to come up on TikTok and Instagram and things like that, and that's what triggered it in the first place. And it was all these people talking about these big ahas when they finally got diagnosed and everything clicks into place. But for me, it was like I got diagnosed and then I started looking back at my life and I'm just like, oh, shit.
It's a lot of grief that can come up.
Yeah. And I was just like, wow. And that was it. I'm just like, well, what's different with me? And it was almost that same thing again. Yeah. Because I'm just like, well, I'm not experiencing the big, this is amazing, fantastic, I've dropped the ball. That one's not coming back to me, so don't worry about that one. But instead, it was just like, there was this profound grief about parts of my life at various aspects up until that point. And I was just like, oh, but it's supposed to be this good affirming thing, right?
And but also we exist in a culture that doesn't hold grief well, because we should just, get on with it and get to the functional part rather than sort of be allowed to go back and process and make sense of, like you said, the natural thing of what has my life been about? How have I carried myself? Like, what have I picked up along the way? We could, so many layers of that, and it's different for everybody as well. But that's normal to kind of go through. And like you were saying, Trish, the compassion piece is important, but I kind of see that as sort of a systematic stepwise approach. Sometimes we're meeting the compassion later on, and first it's sort of just that self-understanding that might sort of lead to deeper self-awareness, that might, allow us to be a bit more neutral with ourselves, where we're not bashing ourselves on the daily for being different. That critic sort of starts to relax a little bit, and maybe then the compassion starts to come through. And so that's a journey in itself to kind of go on. We don't just wake up feeling compassion and go, cool, I get it now, and let me be nice to myself.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is a process in itself. That's been many years of my psychology journey. But I think also part of the late diagnosis journey is actually going, who was I living for before? It feels like I was living for the world, my parents, my
everyone
teachers,
else's expectations.
for everyone else's expectations. I don't think I was really living. That's kind of how I look back at my years before diagnosis, and actually feeling free and validated that the way that I'm wired is actually uniquely wonderful, as opposed to something I'm grinding against because I'm not conforming to the ease that my peers seem to be like walking life out with. And so I think that's the other side of it, is that whole, we hear that phrase when you turn 40. I mean, I don't know, we both live that side out of, the whole fuck it, I'm 40, and like I don't care what other people think.
That's a developmental thing as well. Like kind of take like Erickson's view of like, regardless of what our neurotype is, whatever sort of age phase we're in as well, we're completing different developmental tasks. And so within our 40s, it is that sort of big life review of who you've been, and sort of the wisdom piece coming through. 30s is more about why are we doing what we're doing, who are we? 20s, we want to be just competent and figuring out the adulting part of life. And so there's a lot going on at any one time in our lives. And you put a diagnosis in that, it can bring up a lot of stuff to sift through and make sense of.
100%. So authenticity, let's dig deep into that. Obviously, there is the stereotypical norms that the world perceives as normal behaviour, a word that grinds against me like rubbing fur up the wrong way on a pet.
It's the other N word.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, both are not okay.
Yeah.
So I really feel like there's been a bit of a shift, particularly in recent years, of the whole world becoming more affirming, creating more understanding, and that's happening. Social media has been a bit of a gift in that space of it, making it very accessible to understand different neurotypes, different ways people like to work, and people going, that is a different way to go about it, but it still yields the same outcome, or it still yields a happier person, or whatever that looks like.
Sure.
So how do we live authentically, knowing what we know about the way we work? How do we do that without alienating ourselves, because we still want connection with others? So obviously, if you've got the Zoomies and you're like running around in loops at the family barbecue, that makes it really difficult to connect with other people.
Sure.
And
or if you're pacing around the office just because you're trying to think something through, but you need to have your body moving while you're doing that for your brain to actually quieten down and focus on it.
Totally.
What do you do then?
And also starting with like, it's still very broad and vague, but what does authenticity mean? And I think we can sort of have a broader umbrella view of that, but the sort of paradox of authenticity is it's my definition to yours is going to be slightly different. And so figuring that out on a values level, and then using that sort of structurally to think through some of these daily pieces that you come into, and to the point where for somebody it's, do I even align well of being in a corporate office and a corporate structure? I think COVID's changed a lot of the landscape for us, where flexible working models are more than the norm now.
And people being open to discuss that at least.
Correct.
Of like, okay, where do you work best? I've heard of workplaces, and I'm evolving into this type of workplace myself of, okay, what are your best working hours? What are your ideal working conditions? And even, some of us in my workspace put signs on the door or on ourselves to say, don't touch me, I'm trying to finish something, and when I'm done, I will come out to you.
Yeah, because
And
I'm hyper-focusing, and that is really hard to get out of, and it's like scuba diving, and if you get me out too soon, I'm going to feel really unwell.
Yeah.
that is a great analogy.
Love it.
Yeah.
I do love that. And similarly, like, obviously understanding the whole, I need to do this, but actually I'm going to check in with everyone else in the room. Hey, guys, I'm at this point and I need to move my body. Is that cool with you? That little check-in, 1, respectful, 2, it is advocating for your needs, and 3, it's an opportunity to discuss, collaborate, and maybe compromise if others in the room are like, man, I'm going to find that a bit distracting, but I'm cool if you do it over this side where I'm not going to maybe pay as much attention to you pacing up and down while you're mulling those thoughts
Might also
over.
be permission giving for other people that
Yes.
are not at the point of going, I can actually say this is what I need kind of thing. But all of a sudden, if other people here are going, hey, this is what I need to do to focus during this session.
Which we do a lot in other areas of our lives as well. I think aren't we constantly negotiating and communicating with others around lots of other needs? It's the needs around the neurotype that sort of haven't maybe made enough of the interface yet for conversation, and just normalizing that if you can do the permission giving thing and just name what's going on, hopefully often at the relational level, you can figure that out,
Yeah.
you know, and that people can advocate, no, yeah, don't do that. That's a boundary for me. But even at a deeper level, you know, are you in a company that's neuroaffirming? Are you in a company that's inclusive around the way it operates in terms of what it values for, you know, the people that are coming in and sort of bringing in the quality of work and the money. And so again, sometimes you're making some really hard decisions, and that could be a lifestyle change to a working system change to, am I in the right place, to that more sort of day-to-day stuff of like, how can I work in a more optimally way for myself? And maybe that is a conversation with my manager, my boss, or my co-workers. And because again, the attachment piece is always playing out. We're relational creatures, unless we are, you know, self-employed doing a solo gig, which some ADHDers or ADHDers do end up sort of pursuing and find, oh, I'm actually really entrepreneurial and I work awesome on my own.
Yeah.
You know, or I like a co-working space, but
Well, that was kind of one of the things I was going to talk about, because it almost raises that big question about, you know, that traditional 9-to-5 work model is not necessarily suited for certain neurotypes.
No.
100%. And that's a discussion that I have often with teenagers that are wanting to pursue work for the first time to earn the little bit of moolah to go to EB games or to buy whatever.
Sure.
But that first job is a really big deal often for neurodivergent individuals because they're like, I've got my resume, I'm ready to drop it off everywhere. And I'm like, whoa, hold up. The sound of a deep fry irritates you to no end. So are you going to be able to handle a fast food outlet?
Yes.
Or wearing a headset is absolutely going to grind your gears on a sensitivity side of things. Is working the drive-through going to be a great option for you?
Yes.
Is the same songs on loop at a supermarket actually going to sit well with your sensory preferences or not? Or the smell of that store and the fragrances that they use, because they may not necessarily change that. Working at dusk, for example, where it's all lots of different smells fused together, would absolutely give me a sensory migraine for sure. But for other people, that is their absolute highlight of their week to go into that
And
place.
it varies. If you've had a good night's sleep, your capacity to sort of be with that might be different. If you've got young, depending on what's also happening in the phase of your life, you might be like, absolutely cannot do that.
100%. So finding the right fit workplace, but also the right work hours.
Yes.
I think for some individuals, their absolute prime time is when they first wake up, when maybe if they are taking stimulant medication, when it kicks in, all of those kind of things. Other people, it's really late at night when the world starts to still and wind down. So even picking professions, occupations that actually align and work with your body system, with your brain system, highly important.
Highly, highly important. And whether you're working with a therapist or an occupational therapist, or ideally you've designed some kind of team for those that need it, figuring out these things. What are my circadian patterns? These days we have wearables that can sort of give us some of this data to know more about and track. Thinking about, am I a morning person? Where does that come from? Has that been something that I've learned to manage and cope, and it's a compensatory thing, or it's actually just a preference of how my body kind of kicks in? Also, if you're medicated or not, that can sort of change the landscape internally. So there's a lot to navigate, right? And it can be really overwhelming when you're first starting on that process. And so having that support is actually really, really important. And I'd say, it hopefully lives outside of just your social system or if you're in a partnership with somebody, you know, therapy can be really useful. OT can be really, you know, that there's avenues out there, and having the right fit with someone that's speaking your language where you can collaborate deeply on these things.
Super important.
Well, that's it, you know, especially in the partnership space as well, kind of thing. Like, you know, part of my journey was also my wife, Beth, having to learn with me.
Yes.
What does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for certain times of day?
But what
in
has
our
it
household?
meant historically if you've been
exactly.
together as well? You might have lived in an quote unquote unbalanced relationship where you're holding more or you know, they're holding more. And so it's reworking that to find the sort of more aligned expression of what's going to work for you guys.
Exactly. Yeah.
Super tricky. I think, case in point, last night I had some last minute things that I didn't get done during my workday to do, and we had friends over for dinner. They went home early, thank goodness.
But those mental tabs are running.
But
right?
the tabs are running, and I'm like, oh, the later they stay, oh my goodness. But thankfully they had kids, and that was a beautiful, smooth exit.
Draw a card.
And then my beautiful hubby Tim said, how about I body double with you? I know you've got to pump something out tonight before you go to bed, or you will not sleep, and then you'll try and wake up at 5 a.m. and obviously not do it then either.
But that's the level of authenticity in a relationship
100%.
where you know each other's sort of operate, you know, it's a safe space to exist in.
And for him to sit beside me at our desks, where we've got our home office set up with 2 desks side by side, and he sits beside me tacking away doing his stuff on his end. I don't feel pressure that someone is standing over me, like a child going, do it. And then the celebration at the end of, hey, you got it done. That's awesome, Trish. Not in a patronising way, but he knows how hard I work to put my nose to the grind on the hard tasks that I don't have as much dopamine in.
Yes.
And I get it done. I feel excellent, obviously, and realise why did I put that off for like the whole day when I had. Well, look, it only took a whole day of procrastination, but I got there in the end. But having that support is vital. And if people don't understand that that is the way that you are wired, they can't afford you that grace and compassion to support you in that. And I think starting at workplaces that say, hey, are you a Mac or a PC person? Because we want to provide you with a computer which is the language that you speak. Obviously, if they're giving you some tool to use that you don't even know how to use, or it's going to be really hard to learn a new system, that's going to be a barrier to efficiency. And similarly for any sort of everyday thing as well, it's not necessarily a question of whether you're a Mac or PC person, but like, are you
Speaking
a better...
of, it's actually really good analogy that back in the day I used with parents in terms of like, we're all computers for brains, but maybe some of us are Macs, some of us are PCs, and, you know, pros and cons, but...
They both output the same things.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, let's not get into that argument because the tech heads of the world, I'm sure, have an opinion on this.
Opinions on everything.
But I think at the end of the day, often neurodivergence can be seen as a deficit, as a disorder, obviously, because as part of the diagnostic criteria, those words are part of autism spectrum disorder, attention...
hyperactivity.
Deficit, hyperactivity disorder.
It's a mouthful. Yeah.
But in actual fact, they're just neurotypes. Autism spectrum neurotype. Attention, hyperactivity, deficit, AD. Oh, far out. I don't
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
But if you call it a neurotype instead of a disorder, there's actually more inclusivity around that and a better sort of way of approaching it instead of going, well, you're wrong and wired wrong and that's a problem. Actually going, that actually enables you to do X, Y, Z really beautifully.
And hopefully where we're trending, ideally in the near future, is, doing away with the disorder part of things and sort of not... relying on sort of manualized DSM in terms of what we use diagnostically to understand this, but also maybe dropping the categories sometime, into the future as well, where we're just sort of understanding it under a broad banner of neurodiversity and just realizing how massive of a continuum that actually is for everybody. That, for now, maybe the categorical labels just give us something to point in the direction of, but they don't tell us anything more about that individual, unique person,
And I think that comes right back to that. If we understand ourselves and what helps us to run better, what actually are barriers for us, that then enables us to go, hey, boss, if I could stand at a, adjustable height desk while I work, I'm going to pump out many more things for you than if I was struggling to sit in a chair all day long. Or if I can balance my day of X amount of time working from home and then X amount of time working in the office, if that's permissible for your practice.
But even in that 9 to 5, like James was saying, are you actually how many of us are actually 9-to-5ers? That's a lot of hours. I have, some clients that are able to, smash out the work when they're in that zone in a 2 to 3 hour window. Don't need the 8 hours, but feel under pressure to be functional for 8 hours.
Or sitting there pretending to look busy
Correct.
for the 8 hours.
Oh my gosh, that is hard work. Can we just cycle to that for a
is
little moment?
so much
Well,
effort.
it's, a recipe to burnout, whether it's, daily recurrent episodes of burnout or, long episodes of like, you hit that moment of pure physical burnout and you're like, I can't get out of bed today. I'm out.
And I think for a lot of people, we're not actually wired to work 5 days consecutively. That is actually quite difficult for our body systems to navigate and traverse. So, like you said, having that ability to understand and that self-awareness to reflect, and often we need to do it with someone. Let's be honest, if you are an ADHDer, you're not going to sit there and have these ponderous thoughts and actually arrive at an outcome on your own necessarily.
Or you will, but it's 3 a.m. and you'll forget when you wake up.
This is also true. The struggle is real. So,
unless you've got a system for that works you. Yep.
Yeah, you need a dumping system into whatever note-taking device you have. But the ability to actually churn through that, scaffold some of these findings about yourself into not a document, but into a mental tab or whatever, so that when you enter into any situation, you're actually able to say, hey, this is exciting. I'm glad to be here with you. Do you mind if I turn the music down a little bit? Yeah. And often the other person, unless they know that's something that is grinding against your sensory system, they're not going to be able to help and reciprocate with a response or with a compromise necessarily. And I think often as human beings we can be too afraid to put something forward because you're like, what are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm needy, or are they going to think that this is a bit over the top? But in actual fact, they might also be thinking it too, and we actually both might benefit from this request that one person's putting forward. But I think often it is the neurodivergent individuals that are leading the path in this, that are self-aware, that are self-advocating, that are helping to validate for others in the world around them. It's actually okay for me to ask if we can change something up in this scenario, or if we can include something in this scenario that's going to help them better as well. So it's actually opening up that reciprocation of wanting to afford each other what our needs are.
Totally. And for those that might be listening that sort of are arriving in that's landing for you, that's, incredible, and that in itself is a pathway forward. But for anybody that's sort of sitting there kind of going, I don't know what I need. In fact, I'm at the beginnings of even sort of recognizing my own interoceptive awareness, for example, which for anyone that's sort of not sure what that mumbo jumbo is, it's just the ability to sort of know, oh, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, or I'm feeling this. Alexithymia, the ability to kind of like vocalize what you're feeling and sort of have that literacy internally of like what's going on. So that's part of the gig sometimes. Whether that's come from, the trauma of like not really knowing yourself because you've tried to just be a certain way the whole time, or it's sort of a genuine process that's neurodevelopmentally playing out. It's maybe starting off figuring out all of those pieces of yourself in order to then be able to do, the authentic expression part. And again, that's where places like therapy, or if you've got a coach, I think there's a lot of ways up a mountain, are really, really resourceful to have.
I love that. And I think that whole concept of, are we as neurodivergent individuals alienating those around us by our unmasked, authentic selves? Is it alienating if we're talking about it and having those conversations? No. I don't think it is. Yeah. It's only when we just decide, okay, well, I'm going to start zooming around the room, or I'm going to start chattering nonstop, or just cutting people off and only talking about my topics. Yep. But if we are actually having those conversations of going, hey, that's really interesting for you, I love that for you, and then gently closing off that topic of maybe less interest to yourself, but then segueing, there's an air of respect for the others, and then also bringing in and looping in what you're wanting to traverse towards. I mean, the shock factor of the segues with neurodivergent kids is excellent. I love it, working in that space of, okay, and then back to dinosaurs, or okay, and then back to Pokemon. I'm like, wow, we didn't last long talking about the other thing that we'd started on. And then me bringing that gentle awareness back and often saying, hey, I've noticed that you're wanting to round out the conversation there. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm glad you picked that up. Okay, now back to...
And that level of authenticity. And it's just a much smoother way to operate. But, yeah, it's sort of a two-way street. As much as you are self-advocating, you're offering learning opportunities for other people to sort of broaden their relational capacities for the differences that we all have.
I love that. I love that. And I think holistically all round, the celebration that difference is actually much more interesting and creates so much more rich experiences of life. Interesting can be detected both ways.
I think about the amount of time you spend trying to force a friendship or a relationship kind of thing, as opposed to when you click with someone. And it's just like, we can break for 20 years and then bounce straight back into it kind of thing.
Yep.
And it's as if no time had passed kind of thing, because we just click and bounce and we know each other's ways of working, and it's great.
And there's also no offense in that. I think if there's actual open conversation about, hey, this is part of how I'm wired, and the other person going, oh, I didn't know that. Cool, thanks for looping me in on that, giving me a little bit of intel. Because I think often people on the outside looking in, they're not in our brains. They don't see the inner cogs working, and they don't see those little thoughts flying in and out, or us trying to play whack-a-mole with thoughts or wrestle with them necessarily. But if we give them a look in, if we help to unpack what we're experiencing for other people, they can then go, hey, I could give you a helping hand with that. Not dissimilar. Physical things always play out really easy for other people to see and detect. If you're limping along, people will be like, oh my goodness, you've got a limp. Have you hurt your leg? Can I help you carry that? Exactly. But if we are mentally limping around, we can often mask and cover that up and physically look put together.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, underneath, there's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of screaming for help, which isn't audible. And not until we sort of start to unpack that, or actually explaining to our partners, hey, if I'm doing this hair twirling thing where that little bald patch is now reappearing at the front of my hairline, this is what that means. It means that I am, deeply, deeply fixated and troubled about something. I need some help. But even sharing that, even to the people closest to us, can feel very vulnerable. But actually by doing that, we afford ourselves another support person in the mix, and then we're not alone doing it.
100%. And for me, I think in our conversation around authenticity and self-advocacy and all of these sort of beautiful terms we're throwing out, I think there is right now a lot of deconditioning around the ableism narrative for people as well, which is, yes, there are sort of these vulnerabilities and these things about me that you need to know, the areas of support that I need, but also hopefully on your journey of figuring out your strengths and the beautiful qualities that you have to offer, and where your unique zone of genius lives. There's that ableism piece of, I should be able to do this. I should be able to like this, and kind of working through deconditioning that as well.
100%. And I think the minute you start to realize, these are my strength suits. If I play to those, that's actually going to work in my favour and be less effortful, not just physically but mentally as well. That plays a big part in our overall happiness and sense of well-being, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think all in all, the big takeaway from this episode is communication. Understanding yourself is one thing, but it's no good if you're holding all of that understanding to yourself.
Right.
Also need to be talking and sharing that out. People won't be able to understand you unless you sort of share and give them a look in and give them some insight. So having that communicative ability with those around you to advocate for what you need or unpack what's happening on the inside that they can't necessarily see is going to help to play out for much more meaningful relationships, and also for people to actually have some understanding and compassion towards the way that you're wired, and also support that in whatever way is needed, hopefully. Well, that's what I would hope. I would hope that you would be not around dick humans that don't do that. Well,
If you are, find some new humans.
yeah, find some good ones
Yeah.
that you connect with. This couch is a couch of connection. Find some people like the people on this couch.
Totally. And sometimes it's not just humans. It's I personally, sometimes my pet understands me better than some humans.
This is why the therapy animals are a thing.
I take my dog to my psych.
I love
She's
that.
not a therapy animal, but she comes to me sometimes. And
See,
I'm
she's
just like,
Support crew.
And
exactly.
they know, and it's just so the relationships are broad, and we can have them in all kinds of ways. And
100%. 100%. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this excellent, wholesome, very deep dive topic of Real Zeal. Arijana, thank you for joining us
Thank
and
you for having
sharing
me,
your
guys.
clinical wisdom.
It's nice to have the pros in for once.
Aren't I a pro? Burn.
Well, not at the psychology stuff.
No, I'm an OT.
Yeah.
Gosh, here comes our elitism.
Okay.
And on that note.
And on that note, Arijana, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for
we
having
hope
me,
you'll
guys.
join us again because this has been a very rich
I'd love to
discussion.
come
and
on, yeah.
we'd love to continue, I
So
think.
much more we'd love to pick your brain about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Trish.
I'm Burke.
We think you should get yourself some
Real
Real
Zeal.
Zeal. Bye.